Our sessions for the second workshop on 18 May are being recorded and will be available to our public and our community online very soon. So I'd like to start off today by introducing Jared Auerbach from Red's Best in Boston. And I urge you all, by the way, to look at the bios that are presented on our social media on Ahi Hub Kauai, both Facebook and Instagram. And we have also our bios of all our speakers posted there. So please have a look at their bios. And also, we will be posting links to their businesses and their own websites and social media very soon. So be sure to check them all out after today's session. So back to Jared. Jared founded Red's Best in 2008. And you could see his bio that he started off as a young fisherman from Boston. He worked on commercial fishing vessels from Alaska and Cape Cod. He's worked around many fishermen and saw the advent, as he says, of industrial technology and how it impacted, along with government regulation, the fleets that he was so used to knowing, particularly in New England. And you heard last week's speakers, many of them from Gloucester and New Hampshire. So you know that our communities on the East Coast were hard hit by many things, including regulation and how industrial fishing and imports was affecting everybody. So I really see Jared as an incredible visionary because I've witnessed the growth of his business and his company's outreach to the communities, some of the first outreach to local farmers markets in New England, which, by the way, is pretty old and cold and settled in our ways there. And he clearly spent a lot of time thinking about consumers and thinking about fishermen and improving their lot. And so if you go to his website, I have my notes. What I was struck by is just look at his website, and it shows that some of their topics are wholesale, sushi, the Boston public market and eatery, and become a deckhand. And so all along sustaining not just the sale of fish, the education of the community about where their seafood comes from, why it's healthy. They're also very much paying attention to opportunities for men and women to get into the fishing industry. And so I think that's phenomenal. He is very much following, as all of you are, traceability and sustainability. I could go on and on for each one of you, but I won't. So I'd like to introduce Jared and welcome him to Kauai and the Kauai Fresh Fish Diversity Project.
Hey everybody, thanks Molly. It's flattering. So yeah, I mean, I've been doing this a long time now. I used to feel like I was always the youngest one in the room, and now I often find that that's not the case, which is a good thing. I've kind of just learned a lot the hard way, so don't claim to have it all figured out, certainly, even with that nice introduction from Molly, but definitely happy to help and share ideas. Look forward to hearing what other people have to say. And we kind of sort of have like this entrepreneurial sickness. So we do a lot and I sort of can't help it. So I'll try to talk about some of the different things we've done and what I've learned about them, and feel free to steer me in whatever direction, people are interested in. But as Molly said, I started out commercial fishing. I had no connection to the seafood industry, but I was really drawn to it. I still am. I really love it. I do this during the week and I go fishing for fun on the weekend. And I'm still, after all these years, I'm still just like really compelled by the idea of going out fishing, catching a fish, and then eating it, or, especially sharing it with my neighbors, my family. So I kind of knew in my 20s, I want to transition from working on the boats to being in the industry. Didn't know much about the industry, took a lot of different jobs. It became really clear that, where I wanted to kind of find my niche or build a company was as the guy on the docks working directly with the boats and providing a service to the commercial fishermen. So around here, it's different even up and down the East Coast. So I imagine it's different all over the country and all over the world. But around here, basically any public pier, I can pull up a box truck and unload a commercial fisherman. And we have, I think it's similar around the country, but some of these commercial fishermen, outside my office here, I'm looking at a 76-foot, steel scallop boat. That's a large boat, but there's people in Massachusetts who are digging steamers and razor clams by hand and everything in between. If you're a school teacher, you can go get a striped bass permit for I think like $35, and you can be a commercial striped bass fisherman, even fishing from shore. Um, so I think that's really cool. But and that's where I saw an opportunity to build a business in the early days. Around here, it's a bunch of really old, really well-established companies. They're impressive companies. I have nothing against them, but I couldn't just sort of like walk onto the fish pier and say, I'm going to take that highliner over there and work with them. But we saw an opportunity in 2008 was when all these regulations were really starting to get teeth. And with those regulations come sustainable fisheries, which is great, but it also comes a cost. And what I was seeing was, that cost was sort of like alienating or disenfranchising the smaller boats, because those costs are largely fixed, right? So if it costs me $10, which it actually does, it costs approximately $10 to process a transaction, right? There's obviously variable costs, the more pounds, the more variable labor, but fixed costs, just like, if I cut a $5 check or a $500,000 check, the check costs the same amount, the envelope costs the same amount, the stamp costs the same amount, it takes the same amount of time to print and do it. And same with reporting the catch to the government. It doesn't take long to hit extra zeros. It takes long to log into the glitchy government database they give you. So we saw an opportunity, given the landscape of the industry and what was going on, that like these larger companies didn't want to deal with these small transactions. We were like, hey, maybe there's a way to use modern technology, sort of right time, right place, the right time, with the internet coming on and iPhones and everything. So opportunity to create some web-based software to get in our idea was maybe we can get really, really, really good at unloading a lot of small boats and gather up enough of them to where we're not really pissing off the big guys, but we can get enough market share, enough throughput to create meaningful infrastructure, to where we could have enough infrastructure to have an impact. And I will say, so I read through all the stuff on that Molly provided on the situation in Kauai, and um, I'll share my story. I think the challenge, right? And I'm sure you're all aware of this. You're living it. It's like you kind of need scale to have impact, right? Like you need a forklift if you're going to move 2 pallets a day or 30 pallets a day. Like you need a forklift, and that has a cost. And then like you need your OSHA certificate and all this like crap that goes along with that, and on down the line. So um, hopefully my story can help, or at least like some concepts and ideas. But like the kind of unfortunate reality is like you need, at least in Massachusetts, like to fillet fish, you need like refrigeration and a HACCP plan and like a 3-bay sink and a hand wash sink and all that stuff. So not to be a downer, but we were able, anyway, our story is we're able to kind of scale that infrastructure and scale the supply. And at the end of the day, our job is to match supply and demand. And that's kind of like what's led to everything Red's Best does now. And that's where maybe I can be helpful to people in Kauai, or, to anybody else, is because we take this really seriously, right? Like, as you all know, there's much easier ways to make money in this world than to do what we do. But I do it because I still love doing it, and the people I employ love doing it. They have really hard jobs. So we take that responsibility to the fishermen, as Molly saw, these relationships we have. We take that really seriously. Are we always perfect? No, but like it's very clear that we care, and we put a lot of thought into it. And that thought, and like living this over the last decade, has led to what I think are some sort of like innovative ways to better match supply and demand. At the end of the day, my role in the supply chain, I'm just matching supply and demand, right? So the first part of the story, I need to efficiently aggregate supply. I sort of gave you that. Happy to sort of share more of the software story. But that was like the initial growth. That's aggregating supply, and then it's matching that supply with demand. And the best way is to do that. And that's where it gets like really in depth. Just again, we put a lot of thought into it. Um, if, you know, so that's I'll say one thing that's really cool about our fisheries around here is they're very diverse. So like every day in our warehouse, we have periwinkles, which are like little snails, and like conchs and giant bluefin tuna and cod and all sorts of ground fish. Like we have really, really, really diverse species around here. Again, unfortunately I haven't been to Hawaii, Molly. Um, so I don't know. Although I did spend some time in the Pacific Northwest, more up in Alaska, but we were fishing out of Gig Harbor, so love it up there. But we've really, really diverse species, and it goes to everybody in the society or the community and really the country. So like on any given day, we're selling like some super high end, like white tablecloth stuff, and we're selling some, some like high volume, low price stuff to the like poorer neighborhoods. And so I feel really good about that, but I guess it's a longer story about like how we match supply and demand. The general kind of concept that we focus on, it's always about flexible consumption. I don't know how much that applies like specifically to the ahi, but for us, I think that's really important thing for us. And whenever we're thinking about anything, like if you go on our website, you'll see all this crazy stuff we're doing, but like without a doubt, the common denominator in everything that Red's Best does, it's about flexible consumption and flexible demand, right? So we have our supply coming in, and when that demand is fixed, we have misalignments of supply and demand, and that's a situation where the customer is in a high demand, low supply scenario, their price goes up. The fishermen that we care about and represent in a high supply, low demand scenario, their price goes down. So we spend most of our time thinking of ways to like have flexible demand. But so that comes in a lot of forms with like, we do big like institutional food service fish of the day programs. So like Harvard University buys around 2,000 pounds of filet a week. We fix the price, but they let us choose what type of fish they get every week. It's amazing, right? We have our own retail markets and farmers markets where we've set a precedent of like, don't think you're going to come here and demand haddock, because if we land hake, you're getting hake. And people like that, right? That's intuitive, especially when you can kind of like highlight the fishermen and tell the stories and show like your grit and your connection to the resource, right? Like who's not going to eat what a commercial fisherman tells them to eat, who's going to eat what like Costco tells them to eat, that's a tougher sell, but so that's been good. The last thing I'll say, specific to the ahi situation, we've had so we have Bluefin Tuna, which is how I met Molly. She did a lot of great stuff, the tuna fisheries on the East Coast. But it's seasonal and it's high volume, and they're really big fish and they're tough to work with. So we spent a lot of time in the last like 2 or 3 years now looking into super freezers. So the thing with tuna is you put it in a normal freezer, at least this is my experience. You put a normal freezer, it's going to turn brown. It doesn't last. If you can process that tuna and freeze it, we bought these crazy freezers. We have negative 120-degree freezers. You put it in that and it's like better than fresh. I used to always just go out and catch a fish, bring it home, eat it raw or crudo or whatever. I'll never eat raw fish again that hasn't gone through these super freezers. So that's the first thing that came to mind, Molly, when I was thinking about the stories I was reading here. So I'll leave it there. Sorry if I went a little over my allotted time, but hopefully it's helpful. And we're like really open door policy. I want to put that out there. Like I'm really easy to find. I'm jared@redsbest.com. I do not claim to know everything. Like I'm just sharing what I know today, and I hope to get feedback and ask questions. I just, and we're not like a response to something that our predecessors were doing wrong. I just really look at it like I feel really blessed to live in a place where our community puts so much effort in having sustainable, renewable fisheries and clean oceans, and just trying to constantly rethink this to like just make it a little bit better every day and more resilient, right? Like the like food security you mentioned, Molly, is something that's super important and high on my mind. So thank you.
Thank you, Jared. And you covered an awful lot of ground with some really direct and important things to say. And if you wouldn't mind a question or two, I could say that if anybody on the participants has a question to raise their hand, but I'm going to take the liberty. The one thing that you haven't mentioned is your relationship with fishermen. I know them personally that have sold bluefin tuna, and I also know that you're among the first that I've seen put the fisherman's name and boat at the retail market, and I know our other participants are doing the same, but you were the first that I've seen do it. I also know how good the fishermen feel about that and their customers.
Yes.
Can you just comment on that relationship with the fishermen, your suppliers?
Yeah. So that, well, that was definitely a right place at the right time, kind of lucky thing. So we start, I told you the story. So the story was we developed this software, and then it was like the early teens or whatever. And, that was like, it's not that long ago, but that was really the beginning of what I saw as like this farm to table movement, or where consumers really started showing interest in like caring and wanting to know where their food came from. And we were like, whoa, this was like a data problem to us. And now we're like, wow, this data has value down the supply chain. And, so we added to our software, and we built a mechanism so the packing room guys can access the unloading data and can print a sticker that kind of tells the story of the catch, or it tells the story of one of the fishermen who contributed to the aggregated catch. We try to be clear about that, because the beauty of what we do is we built this software to be able to unload 50 or 60 striped bass boats in a day. So, but it, so, and actually, and we were using QR code to kind of package that data. So we would go onto a truck, and then the customer, now it's on their loading dock. So like Harvard would get it, it's on their loading dock. We used a QR code to give Harvard the ability to take that data. A QR code links to a URL. We programmed our software to create a unique URL, just the web page for every fish that unloaded every day. So our drivers, our unloaders, were already putting the data into the software. But then the QR code gave Harvard or any customer the ability to take that story from the loading dock and bring it to the front of the house. And literally, I mean, you could read articles hang on my wall. You'd think I invented the QR code. I did not. It's just right place at the right time kind of thing. I mean, I remember now everybody, I don't know how it is in your part of the country, like every restaurant has a QR code for a menu. This was like 2013, 2014. I remember I used to have to make marketing material to like explain to people how to get a QR reader app. It wasn't just always on your phone. You had to like download an app, but have to like train people how to use a QR code. But they've been around forever, and it's pretty simple technology. But the important thing is it gets back to that like encouraging flexible consumption, right? So like if I want Harvard University to feed their students cusk or skate wings or dogfish or some of these like really like not top of mind items in New England, the best way to do that is to connect it to the fishermen who are harvesting that product. So that's been my experience. That's where it really punches through and matters, is it helps like encourage and promote flexible consumption, which like I said is the common denominator in everything we do. So yeah, and it's just like I'm not the only one who thinks commercial fishermen are awesome. Like it's become really clear the whole world kind of does. Like that's why there's 100 shows on TV about commercial fishermen. It's like I don't think that skews to a particular demographic. I think like we all somewhere inside of us, obviously the people on this call more than others, but everybody has a little part of them that like is drawn to hunting and gathering at the end of the day.
Absolutely. Well, I have to say thanks so much for your presentation, or your expertise, your knowledge, as we say here, talking story. Incredible. And I think with every one of you, we could follow up with a whole series, because you really are gliding through. I mean, I could ask you about what in the world, how did you start one person? But anyway, that will be some other time. Thanks again, Jared. I know you might have to run. Do you have another? Yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to listen. I'm just going to be driving. I did want to
Okay.
mention, we also do the farmers markets, which for us too, I mean, we're in Boston, which is like, centuries of seafood. And until like 2000, 12, you couldn't sell seafood in Boston farmers markets. So I read about that in Kauai, and we had a similar experience, but that's worked out great. And now actually it's not more, almost all of them actually now, they're not even my employees. It's just like we've set it up in a way that community people can come get everything from our shop and then bring it to their communities and sell it at farmers markets. Again, because we have the infrastructure, which is kind of that gate or that hurdle that's difficult but not impossible to solve. So I just wanted to add that I sort of have some experience there and feel that pain, but they can be very good. I mean, the people who run these farmers markets do really well. And actually often, sorry, I'm rambling, but we have a bunch of instances where family members of the fishermen that we work with run the farmers markets. So that's great, right? And then it's like we can pack all of their family members' fish for them, and then if they want other stuff, they can, they can have other items. It's not like they only have scallops; they can have, 5 or 6 or 8 different items. So, yeah, thanks again, everybody.
Oh, that's great. Thanks again. And I think you're all going to see the theme of innovation, creative thinking, thinking about the public and the community through every one of these. And I know we're going to hear more about farmers markets from all of our speakers today. And just one more thing, next week, our last workshop will include people that have helped get the regulations and the permits and other things underway so that communities and dockside people can actually get it done and get the permissions. And we know that that's a battle too. So again, thanks, Jared. All right, our next group, the second speakers are Mike Baran and Aaron Longton. Longton, yeah, I hope I pronounced that right, Aaron.
Yep,
from
that's right.
Port Orford Sustainable Food. And I got to say, interesting way to meet them. I met first Mike Baran through an introduction and recommendation from Grundens. Grundens, the guys, the Swedes that make oilskins for fishermen around the world that we all know in New England and everywhere else. The Grundens have an amazing, I'll give a plug. They have really cool short videos that feature working American fishermen, fisher, whatever we're supposed to correctly call them. And I was introduced to Port Orford guys here through that experience of the Grundens video, and it's called, where's my page? Fish, go ahead. It is
A Way of Life. I think
A Way of Life. And so I was luckily connected to Mike, and we had conversations over time and talked about this project. And he told me that I most necessarily have to include Aaron, his partner in this, who is also captain and a partner in crime on getting the Port Orford sustainable seafood entity up and running. And what I think is really important about these two guys, like Jared, they have long experience in and successful experience diversifying and achieving what they needed to do for their community, which is, as they told us at the beginning of this workshop, a really small place, maybe even smaller than Kauai. But their bios are posted on our social media. But what I was really struck by as far as what they've achieved since, they're going to tell you about when they started, but what's important about these gentlemen in Port Orford is that they went after the funding in addition to their dreams and their initiatives and having the vision about their community and what they wanted to happen with their fishermen. And I don't know if it was Mike or Aaron that called it a seafood desert. In other words, the sea of plenty, but not a lot of fish for the community members to buy unless they said they had a neighbor or family member that had the fish. And what I learned from conversations with Mike and Aaron was that they were very savvy to go after the, if I got it, FDA grants in the beginning that allowed them to, and their partners to build what they've built. And I know you can't do it alone, and you also can't do it without money. And so they have a lot to say, and I'll end my introduction here. And I don't know how they want to do this, but I think you're going to find this incredibly interesting and important as far as their expertise for Kauai. Okay, I'm going to turn off my mic and.
Well, thank you, Molly.
Thanks, Molly.
I was going to start out. I was one of the founding members back in 2009. There was 3 commercial fishermen, and we pooled $1,500 a piece to buy a couple hundred, or a few 150 quart ice chests. We didn't even have any totes, and some market scales, that were good for marketing, certifiable, and we had a hard time. The reason why we did it to begin with is we had been going through a groundfish crisis that resulted in a big push for marine reserves, and we live in one of the richest ecosystems on the West Coast here at Cape Blanco. You've got the California current and the Davidson current that swings up, and a lot of offshore structure. So a lot of great habitat, and because of the high relief habitat, it wasn't trawled to death, back before the Magnuson-Stevens Act, when the foreign fleets were in here and stuff. So there's always been a pretty good foundation of stocks here. And we knew that we were in the bullseye for getting a marine reserve here. So we figured that rather than sticking our head in the sand and saying no, which would have just resulted in them doing it without our input, we'd engage. And so we sat down with Satan himself, and the big nonprofits, Pew and Oceana and Surfrider Foundation, and we shared our experiential knowledge, and they told us about marine reserves in places that had been established for years, and the science behind it. And it's kind of started to make sense, that it could be like a savings account for our waters. But in doing so, we knew that we'd have to lock up some of our turf, right? And so we have a nearshore fishery here that's primarily a live fish fishery, where we vent the fish and they go down to the Asian markets down in the San Joaquin Valley in Central California, Bay Area. And we probably locked up about 20% of that fishery into, never to be fished again. And so we wanted to mitigate that loss, even though we did kind of see it as an investment, by marketing fish locally and adding value the best we could. We live in a small town that's miles from anywhere. When they say that we are in the middle of nowhere, one person can drive south and one person can drive north on 101 highway here and race to somewhere, and it'll be a tie. So that's the middle of nowhere. And I think reading the situation with Kauai, it's kind of the same thing. You got your captive audience, so much demand, but you have influxes in supply, and so there's gluts in the market, and you're having problems there. We found that the best thing that we could do is get away from fresh, and frozen is the new fresh. And so we got set up. Of course, well, I guess kind of get in front of myself. The 3 fishermen who started this realized that as 3 independent fishermen couldn't get anything done. So we went ahead and gifted the company to our overarching nonprofit, which was Port Orford Ocean Resource Team. And then from that foundation, we were able to go for grants, and public money. And so we ended up, through Business Oregon, getting a blast freezer, a walk-in cooler, forklift, just some of the bare essentials. We ended up getting 3 full totes and a couple half totes, and away we went. And we are doing all different types of fish here. We're doing underutilized species like Jared was talking about, skates and wolf eel and things that you don't see out there. But we started through Fish Local Collaborative, and went to the 2012 summit that they have, and it wasn't in Gloucester, it was New Hampshire. Anyway, and that's where we met a bunch of other people that were doing the same thing. And we ended up building our CSF to mimic another CSF out of Vancouver, Washington. And that is Skipper Autos. And they've done, they developed a software that we bought into. And I'll let Mike talk about that here in a little bit, because he's been more associated with the admin of the CSF. I'm still a fisherman, and I'm the one who purchases fish for our company. But we, in this small community here, you couldn't get fish here unless like it was shorty crab, or somebody caught more than their quota and they gangstered it off the boat. I mean, that was, and it was weird because that's the kind of valuation people had for seafood here too. You know what I mean? It's something that got dropped off in your driveway in the dark of night, And so it was kind of hard to get them to understand that it was going to be $20 and $30 a pound now, And but we have a lot of customers right here locally. It wasn't always that way, but this is one of our no doubt our best sites as far as getting through on the ratio, per capita. But we're all over Western Oregon. We haven't done a lot of marketing out there, distant where we're shipping it. We have a black cod box that we can get into like 7 Western states, in a couple of days time. But we haven't cracked that egg yet. We've always just tried to, we started out going to farmers markets like Jared was talking about. Only, I'm sure in Boston, there's probably 20 farmers markets within 20 miles. Well, we go 100 miles to the first farmers market that's a real farmers market here over in the Rogue Valley. And we've done markets in the Rogue Valley and the Umpqua Valley and Willamette Valley. And in fact, I'm going to a farmer's market this Sunday that's 230 miles away, right? You want to think about that? Over in Bend on the east side of the mountains. Now, I don't think it's going to be economically feasible, but I'm over there pushing the CSF to get as many signups as I can. It's about meeting people and building relationships. And so, and that's fun. I'm anxious to do this. I'm crazy, but that's a good thing. Like I said, I think the smartest thing we ever did is realize that we have an intermittent supply. So where he's talking about having flexible demand, we have built-in flexible supply. So the best thing we can do is get it shelf stable and put away in our freezer. We blast freeze down to -30 and we store at -10. And once we get stuff in 1 pound units of, boneless fillet, then we get to work on selling it. And, there's a lot of things like we have a halibut season. They're changing the structure of it now, but I mean, it used to be maybe 2 or 3 days a year, 8-hour season, and that's when we had to get our, and tuna's kind of the same way. Later in the season, we're able to get albacore tuna, but like this last year, they never came within range of our small boats hardly at all. And when they did, they were just small little peanuts. Even the big operations down here said that they only got about 40% of what their target was last year. So we ran out of tuna a long time ago, but we have to kind of anticipate what our demand is going to be, and source accordingly and get it put into storage where we can work off of that pot. Yeah, we haven't had the advantage of being near our market. We sell a certain amount of fish here locally, but Western Oregon is all up and down the I-5 corridor. I mean, we have 2 delivery routes and they're probably 300+ miles each in the round trip. And we have all kinds of stops along that way. We do that once a month. We do the northern part of the state in the middle of the month, And then 2 weeks later, we do the southern part of the state during the first week of May. And now we're going over the top of the hill to Bend. And so that took figuring out some transportation. We do all our transportation. We have a van that we bought with the USDA grant that we got. And then finally our nonprofit sunsetted. We pretty much accomplished all our objectives, which was a marine reserve, and then we designated a stewardship area, which is a greater economic zone of our fishing waters. That has been useful. In fact, we just used that to fend off the offshore wind energy. One of the call areas was right out here in front of us, and because we had done all that work up front during the marine reserve process to quantify the dollar value of all the different fisheries and where we catch our fish, we were armed with the data to demonstrate what was essential to us. They didn't hesitate, they backed off. That's pretty bizarre because other people are still having a real hard time with it. But being that we, did all that work up front, it's protected our resources and our access. So we engage in conservation and our marketing. We're trying to tell our story with a fish, and we look at all of our seafood consumers as a constituency. If we have major issues, that we can pull support from them because we're interdependent now. And that's just how we've gone about it. Now, when I think about Kauai and that ahi, I think about, like Jared was saying, if the highest tech, coldest freezing system you guys can have, to when you guys have gluts, that you can get that stuff put up in primo condition. And then in the times of the year where you guys aren't catching any, work hard to market that. It seems to me that it'd be sensible to look outside of your island area. I mean, you guys probably ship to other islands there too. And I would imagine a certain amount of it makes it to the West Coast. But I mean, it sounds to me like you've got 3 or 4 corporate villains that do that, and they're holding all the cards. So, that's what I would suggest, is that you guys bottom up, get the capacity to put that stuff up, understand that you might not get paid right away for it, you know what I mean, because you're going to be putting that stuff up. And but I'd love to build a relationship with you guys, and because we're about story fish, and we will feature other people's fish. It isn't all about this place. It's about other people that have a relationship with their place, and a story to tell, and a story of conservation and sustainability and social justice. So
I'll jump in there. So Molly, as you mentioned, the Grundon's video is kind of what led you to us, and that was titled Way of Life because I think part of the initial creation of the company was to sustain a way of life for Port Orford fishing, or its fingers, whether baiting tubs or processing or just a port worker. I think the fishing industry contributes to roughly 30% of like our entire town's revenue. And so creating Port Orford Sustainable Seafood was in an instant, in one way, a way to sustain fishing around here, because it seems like it would be a lot easier for government agencies to manage, a lot or fewer big boats than to manage a lot of small ones. And that would just totally kind of wipe out this entire community. And the way of life is what we aim to sustain. We've got multi-generational fishing families here, as do most coastal fishing communities. And you know, I see a lot of similarities between Port Orford and Kauai, and one that I think could be uniquely beneficial is the way that POS has kind of been created, you know, from fishermen pooling together and then deciding like, well, we might be biting off more than we can chew. Let's let a nonprofit kind of spearhead this and then get all the funding and then kind of turn it back over to the community once it's able to kind of stand on its own two legs. And yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, I have a bit of this kind of imposter syndrome in these kind of moments because I've been doing this for less than a decade. I started you know, in the processing room downstairs, and then moved into a CSF management position when the opportunity arose. But that's where I've spent a lot of my time is in kind of figuring out what works best when it comes to direct to consumer sales. And we started with kind of like the 2 pound, 4 pound, and 6 pound shares, and you get what you get type of thing. And turns out, you know, the consumer is pretty picky, you know, they want to be able to choose. And so this new system that we have is way more flexible. It's way more user friendly. You don't have to get anything you don't want. Like Jared was mentioning, I can't remember the terms he was using, but we call it eating with the ecosystem. You know, kind of encouraging people to step outside of their kind of culinary comfort zones and step into something that's abundant and kind of
Seasonal.
Yeah, seasonal and yeah, not top of mind, but delicious. And now we've got, like, we started doing that with skate and what's another one, some sole, you know, that we typically don't get a ton of is it sole I'm thinking of? Petrale sole. We don't typically get a ton of petrale, but
It's all caught in the trawl fishery, and we're all hooked and line boats here.
But when we started offering it, you know, it sells in a heartbeat. And you know, I think that there's many different ways that this ahi could be sold, and I'm stoked to provide my insight on what we've learned that's worked best for us. And yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. And Aaron, I have to say, important to say about both of you is on the Grundens and your own really beautiful website, by the way, and your marketplaces, that you use the word fun a lot. And it's clear.
Fun. Forget about it.
Why do it? And that's
Right.
I think that's a big similar relationship with our Kauai and our Hawaii fishermen, that you mentioned community, and I know Clay Tam, my partner on this project, is listening in from Oahu, but those are incredibly similar values. And I want to keep it moving because you've given us a lot of really important and valuable insights. And the other thing that you brought up, Aaron, when you mentioned is what I see is extensive work with the different aspects of fishing industry, including the conservation organizations that have been involved in the last 20 some years, and marine protected areas, et cetera, which Kauai has had to deal with too, as you can imagine, and the closure. So that's important. It sounds like you've really did the great work for all your time at it, of having data now that supplies information as far as the wind farm development, et cetera. And I know Pacific Islands Fisheries Group and many of our fishermen that work with us as research partners understand that the data is important for dealing with regulations and conservation plans and sustainability, that they really, really need to be based on good data, good science, and that's the other side of what we do. And so can I ask one more question, if you don't mind? Our last speakers last week talked, Bob Campbell, I think, and others mentioned as far as sustainability and the role of chefs. And we all know in our communities, our cooks, our chefs have a big role on Hawaii. But what we learned is that so many of them don't have, even chefs that are in the business and serve seafood, don't seem to always have education about what exactly is going on, you know, the methyl mercury, you know, taint that's been sort of promulgated, or that certain species are on the brink and, you know, fishing down the food chain. But can you just speak to the role of, do you have an outreach to chefs yet? And if you probably, if you haven't, probably will, but can you comment on that?
We've been working with restaurateurs and chefs for quite some time, and there's a big learning curve. I mean, they don't teach that stuff in school, right? And when you're getting kicked out the back of a truck from, you know, seafood company B, that doesn't come with a lot of information. So storied fish and having a good communication ability with chefs is really essential. I did want to add one thing, but that is completely off the side. But when you're talking about sustainability, we are sitting in it's Oregon State University's Marine Science Center field station here in Port Orford, and it was part of our nonprofits, and we just got done gifting this to Oregon State University. So in perpetuity, we have the means here to make sure that the marine reserve that we can actually see from here also is being studied, and that our questions are being answered, and you know, it wasn't just locked up for nothing, you know. So that was a part of what we were able to do, and it's part of our whole sustainability thing, is, you know, to make sure that it's studied and shared with others.
I want to add to the question about restaurants and chefs. It's not a huge part of our business dealing with chefs and restaurants, because in our experience, and I'm sure that any fishmonger would agree, that a restaurant typically wants the fish cheaper than you can provide it to them. And with our company in particular, we set out to pay local fishermen a higher price than competing fish buyers. We pay our staff, our processing crew, a living wage.
You went up there today?
You know, a couple dollars higher than the minimum, and so that immediately makes our product, you know, a more valuable item. And there's certain chefs that story matters to them, and they're able to justify the price for their meal that they're going to create, but that's not all of them. And so it's not the main source of our revenue. You know, the CSF is kind of the guts of the whole thing. The direct-to-consumer model is where you find the passionate consumer that cares about that kind of thing.
All right. Well, thanks for that viewpoint. It's interesting. And thank you both, Aaron and Mike. Really appreciate your presentation, and look forward to sharing it on our, you know, to get it out to Kauai fishermen and everybody else, and consumers. So thanks again, and really appreciate it. And we'll keep in touch. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. And so I'm going to introduce our last two panelists, experts. That would be Lane and Captain Bill Remke. Come on, you guys, step up and unmute.
All right.
There you go.
Hi there.
Hello. Hi.
We're on the other end of the spectrum there, really, right? Like we're
yeah,
just
you're
kind of just thinking about the marketing and selling the fish, but we
wait, Bill, hang on, Captain. I take the distinct pleasure of introducing you. As I heard Lane, your partner there, whispered to you, and that's my pleasure. Well, I direct you to, as Bill just said, they're here today because they represent another a startup from a fishing and harvesting captain to a business that has thought about diversifying their catch and doing some very cool things with Bill's albacore catch. So Bill is the captain of the Judy S. They're out of Chinook, Washington. I always forget which side of the border they're on. And Lane Remke is his business partner and life partner. There you have two beautiful daughters. And as Bill's bio said, as far as Bill's background, he's been captaining fishing vessels for 22 years. He's fished albacore tuna for 10. And I know him that he's been fishing throughout the Pacific. I know that he was fishing in the roaring 40s, down in the South Seas, chasing albacore over the years, and eventually ended up, after captaining boats for other businesses, purchasing and forming his own business and being the captain, and joined by Lane Remke. And Bill has done different things. I know he's worked in the Hawaiian Islands. I know specifically on Maui, running charter boats, having different aspects of life in the Hawaiian Islands. So I think he's uniquely qualified to think about the challenges on Kauai for small boat operators, fishermen. And he brings that knowledge here. And I have to say, he's also one of the stars of the National Geographic Deadliest Catch series, Battlefish. I think he's the highliner on that show. But as far as reality shows, I think Captain Bill is pretty much engaged in reality on the boat. So it's not necessarily as some of the reality shows, but really he's here, and Lane, to talk about their startup and their diversification. And Lane Remke has, as Mike and Aaron have noted and alluded to, the importance of insights from science, from conservation, from field work, and everything else related to the sea and the ocean. Lane, I know, got a degree at the University of New Hampshire years ago. She's worked in all kinds of biological capacities in marine fisheries. I've known her since she was a little girl. That has nothing to do with her expertise here today. She's been a protected species observer on all kinds of boats, scallops, boats, dredges, even though I mentioned I wouldn't tell her mother that she was on a scallop dredge when she first started. Surf, herring, seine vessels. Lane moved out to the Pacific, the Northwest, where that was her quest to, like all of our other speakers, she had a passion for the ocean that she discovered once she got to the ocean. And the one thing I can say that Lane mentioned in her bio that I know about her is that by being on the boats all those years, she learned from a unique perspective what the challenges and problems and benefits there are by being in the business of being a fisherman or having a seafood operation. So she knows it from many different perspectives. And when she teamed up with Bill, I think she brought that knowledge to table. So Bill, who of course is a captain and fisherman, then had the partner that came with the additional experience of working in all those different fisheries on land, working for NOAA as an observer, and also thinking about how captains can get and their crews get a better deal. So with that, I'd like to introduce Lane Remke and Captain Bill Remke. And welcome. Thanks for joining us today, you two.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks so much for a wonderful introduction.
It sure was.
And I am going to need to hop. I'm sorry, our daughter is awake. So I might need to hop out, but Bill is here. Excuse me.
No worries. Yeah, I mean, interestingly enough, the reason we got into tuna was we loved the sustainability factor of the albacore fishery. I loved the techniques they used to catch them with the jigs, hook and line, with the bait poles. Loved everything about it. At the end of the day, I love the product as well. It was just a delicious product that you just don't see out there as much. You always see the yellowfin yellowfin, big eye, bluefin you just never see, you don't see albacore, and you don't see it on the West Coast, which I always found amazing. So obviously we had big plans when we got the boat of trying to diversify the product now that we had the opportunity, since we own the boat and we could kind of manage where it went. But it's been a little more difficult than we had anticipated. And getting into this, I never thought we would get into the canning side of things. When I got into tuna, I wanted sashimi and sushi and all, poke and all this other stuff. So we were just didn't think we were going to get into canning. But now we love that business model, only because for us being family run, it eliminates a lot of infrastructure, like people are talking about. We can keep the canning on pallets, and we're not processing it ourselves. We can contract somebody else to process it and do the hard work. But it makes it easy for us to be able to get it out to people that want it. There's a little bit of a can thing going on right now with just small little markets and restaurants where they're getting a lot of interest in it lately. But we're still trying to figure it out, but we feel like it's been a good way for us to get through our off season, because historically this boat's only fished the albacore fishery. And until we got it, it was always a brine boat. And so we just upgraded all the refrigeration and made it into a blast freezer. And, we freeze at sea now. And so we really just never thought we'd go this direction, but we're really coming to find out that it's working for us, and it gets us through those slow times when we're not able to get the money from the wholesale monies we get from the tuna offloads, and just the simplicity of it. I mean, honestly, just getting it out there and just being able to, we're selling it right now as far away as, I mean, we get it out to Gloucester, but we sell it at 3 different stores in Wisconsin. We're in 3 different CSFs around Portland and the river here. We do another one just in up in Seattle, and just trying to, we're just trying to figure out what works right now. And I think in the future we wouldn't mind trying to do something with our with the product, but we just find that we're going to have to, with the frozen product, I think, like the other guys were talking about, we're going to have to, you have to process that in a refrigerated processing facility, and there's a lot more infrastructure to it than say an iced fish or maybe even a brine fish. So for us, there's a little more infrastructure involved to really diversify, but for now, for having a single boat operation and having some longevity to your product that's not in need of refrigeration, being able to can like that, I think has been real helpful. And I don't know if something like that would help out there. I don't, it's just getting that equipment, like we found out, shopping for equipment out here. It's hard to come by that old canning equipment, and just getting the people that cut fish these days has been even a real issue. But we really like that right now. For right now, we really find that business formula is working for us, and keeps us fishing for now. But at some point, I'm probably going to try to get off the water, and we'll really start to try to think about some different avenues than what we're doing right now. But without Lane, she took off, so she knows a little bit more of the business side of things there. So.
That's all right. I know I can follow up that I failed to mention in your intro, Bill, that I think I have it here. You have a really accessible online web sales site that Pacific Tuna Products that everyone can get to. And also you make your own labels. You have a philosophy about identifying your products from the other products on the market. If you wouldn't
Yeah.
mind talking about that, and also the fact that you're in an area where tinned seafood is part of the historical, lay of the land. Could you talk about?
Yeah, it really
that?
is.
Thanks.
It's a unique area, and it's hard to move cans in this area because it seems like on the West Coast anyways. I mean, as far as I think down there in Oregon, maybe Charleston might be one of the most southern canneries I know of, but they're getting to be far and fewer in between. I think on the East Coast, you'd have to go to Puerto Rico from what I hear. I think they get their cannings done down there. So for us, if you go to the thing about the labeling was we felt like as a consumer, there's a lot of, I hate to say it, but I feel like there's a lot of just BS on the labels of the cans that are really kind of misinforming to the consumers, that really shows a lot of, it kind of confuses the consumer when they're by the type of gear and stuff they're trying to say they don't use on the cans and MSC certifications and all that. So we kind of try to eliminate all that, just have a nice clean can that showed it for what it is. And like, obviously, if you know these fisheries up here, we're not killing dolphins, and we're not like, this tuna isn't caught with a seine net or anything. So there's different stuff that we just thought we would keep it simple, I guess is the old philosophy. And then just trying to have a label, I guess, with a logo that might be something that people can identify with. So it was easy for them to see it around other cans. And maybe knowing that associated with that label is the fact that they know the fisherman that caught that fish on that boat and know that it was canned here. And so I think accountability and just being able to identify with that product and being confident with that, knowing that, knowing how you caught the product, knowing how you landed it, knowing how you've taken care of it, knowing how it was offloaded. And, I just feel like, it feels good to be associated with that. It's feel good fishery. And when you're doing it right, like it seems like everyone here is just feels good to be associated with it.
And another question, there we go. Can you hear me, Bill? Yeah. There we go. Another question was that I know you thought about the decision to can yourself, whether your business would do its own canning, but then you mentioned the difficulty in finding the equipment and also the cutters. Was that part of your selection of why you decided to pay for it, basically, to have your canning done by someone else?
It is. We, I think that's the same everywhere with these seafood processing facilities. I know it's real hard for us just to get crew on a boat. I feel like in areas of that where I hate to say there's more expertise there, but it seems like with the fish cutting and processing, there is more so than a guy I would hire on the boat. So I think it's hard. I know the workforce has kind of dwindled in that arena in this area. And for us, it would be hard as a seasonal fishery, it'd be hard for us to just have a cannery that's just sitting there at idle for 8 months out of the year, and then just have us come in, can some loads and be done with it. And then try to find that man force or woman force back every year to do it. And not to mention the real estate and the cost of just the machinery and whatnot. So for us, it wasn't a good, I feel like you need some sort of a co-op situation where you had several boats that would come in and do that together. And, with the few canneries there are, for us, having those options where I can choose over 3 different canneries, I'd rather leave it up to them and their expertise. But in a lot of areas, they don't have that option. So we're lucky enough up here, I can find the cannery with the best price. And for us, that's what it comes down to. But a lot of it's how the cannery how they loin the fish and how they pack it and how it's canned. And we've been with the same canner since we started our process, and we would hate to go to somebody else. So, and we don't know if we started canning our fish, if there would be some sort of a learning curve, and maybe it would, be a season or two before we were coming out with quality fish. So we're going to continue to utilize the canneries up here and hopefully get into some of our own proprietary ingredients with the cannery, but just utilize their expertise and their infrastructure so we don't have to fork it out yet, because most of the money's going into the boat. So
Yeah, I'm sure that's really useful knowledge. I mean, as you know, canneries used to be part of life here for, even on Kauai, there was apparently a cannery that canned aku, skipjack, but a lot of that, all that infrastructure is gone, at least as far as we know, despite canning being like critical to food security and everything else here. So, but as we've heard others mention, the beauty and the value and the taste of the tinned or fish. And I wanted to mention too, you didn't get to this yet, or no one did, but maybe others have mentioned how tinned and canned seafood, maybe you did, is showing up on high-end seafood restaurant menus, and it has been now at least 3 or 4 years. And if you investigate that, even on the shelves of fancy grocerias, it's almost always non-US supplied tinned fish, including albacore, coming from Spain and Portugal. But they're beautifully packaged and they're charged very high prices. Do you see opportunities for growth for US seafood producers to follow in the path of the Spanish and the Italians and the Portuguese on producing beautifully tinned, high quality fish? Because I will give you a plug. Everyone agrees that your tinned albacore is extremely well cut and tasty and fabulous. So that's why
awesome.
It would be great to have more of that kind of quality seafood in the can, not just for taste, but also for food security in places like the Hawaiian Islands.
Yeah. No, I thank you for that. And it's tough. I feel like with the American market here, because I've been to those those stores where you see the stuff from Europe in the glass jars and they're beautiful little loin in there. And I don't know if it's because our market's been tainted by some of these bigger brands and some of the scandals that have gone on with all that, and just the quality of it. I feel like for us, like we're a lot smaller, and if we decided we wanted to do something like that, like we have enough of customer base that would be interested in that they would really enjoy it. But I don't know. It's really hard for me to imagine putting out those jars that are around, those, I think they're around $12 to $15 for the 7-ounce jar. Boy, it's a tough, I would love to see that stuff come back. I do. I'm, we obviously have a lot of boutiques and a lot of restaurants that are ordering up the cans, and we sell the ventresca, which is just the belly fat, and they just love opening the can and putting it right on top of the salad. So I think for me, it reminds me of like the technique they use with the canning is like a sous vide, where they're taking that loin of tuna with a little belly fat and salt and cooking it in the can. So it's cooking it with all that good fat and flavor. Whereas the other ones, the American ones that we're so used to, they're cooked twice and the juice is taken out, water's added, and all this other stuff's going on there. So I could see it happening on a smaller scale, definitely, with the smaller canneries and whatnot.
Super.
But
Well, thanks.
we definitely want to try to do something like that in the future.
Cool. Well, thanks, Bill. And I know reality is that when the children are waking up and they have to be attended to, that we miss Lane, and you did a good job representing
Thank you.
your business without your
Well,
partner.
the big joke right now is, obviously I can't wait to get offshore and fish tuna so I can get some sleep.
Oh, super. Well, I really appreciate your you joining us today and your perspective about, being a smaller operation and
Yeah,
also,
definitely.
and thinking about your, how you got into the diversification through canning and tinning, and so good luck on all of that. And I'd like to thank everybody, starting with Jared Auerbach, Mike Baran, Aaron Longton, and Lane Remke, Bill Remke, Captain Bill Remke. Check him out on Battlefish, people. He's on Netflix. But thank you all for contributing to today. It's been yet again a phenomenal group of experts. These are being recorded. They will be posted. I hope our community is able to follow up with questions. Our experts said they're all willing to basically stay on the line with us on Kauai as we try to pursue this further. So thanks again to everybody, and we'd like to invite everybody to our final workshop next Wednesday, and our speakers will be posted today. And so once again, thanks to all of you for bringing your knowledge and your expertise to talk story with us today, and the Pacific Islands Fisheries Group, and Clay Tam and I thank you for all of that. And have a great day. We say mahalo and aloha.